Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Budget and Finance Committee for the City of Franklin. This is Thursday, March the 2nd. I'll do a roll call vote. Alderman Peterson, how do you vote?
Here.
And the chair votes here. Let it show that Alderman Potts and Alderman Baggett are not here. We possibly expect Alderman Potts to be here later. Let's go ahead, since we cannot approve the minutes, we do not have a quorum. Let's go into new business. Budget presentation, community and economic development. Eric, you want to lead that one
We're going
off?
through our various city functional teams, and we have folks that lead those teams. So I want to give them a chance to introduce it. And Vernon Girth, who's our Assistant City Administrator for Community and Economic Development, will kick it off because this is the team he works with every day.
Thank you, Eric, and good afternoon, and Clyde. Tom and Emily, Paul, and their teams don't need much introduction, and I know you know that. But what I wanted to say this afternoon is that in much of what these three departments do, and working with the other departments throughout the city, it really can be broken up into two big areas. One is process driven, and the other is forward thinking. And when we talk about process current development, responding to property maintenance complaints and concerns of residents about traffic, I have a habit of not doing that. And other services and inquiries that come in. But ultimately, as you know, we get our direction from the decisions and documents that are approved by the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, the Planning Commission, and Historic Zoning Commission. And it's their guidance that serve as the foundation of how we interact with our citizens and people investing in the community. So I'd ask that you think about that as we go through the budget, as the respective budgets. But there are a few things that I do want to highlight. First of all, we're going to, you'll see a program enhancement in the Building and Neighborhood Services, the budget, department budget, for about $50,000 that we are going to seek direction from the Development Services Advisory Commission to perhaps survey the people that we work with, that obtain permits, seek development approvals, and making sure that our level of service is meeting the expectations of the people that are investing here and yourselves too. Secondly, with the Planning and Sustainability Department, we have obviously a couple big initiatives working on updating Envision Franklin over this next year, as well as doing more work on the Goose Creek Coordinated Study. But for them to be active, to be on the cusp of best practices, you're going to see some funding that'll allow our department review team that consists of about 30 of our employees across the department to go away for a few days and meet with our counterparts in another community and look at some of the development and understand some of their processes so they can bring them back here and hopefully implement the ones that work best into our processes and the services we provide. And then finally, with our engineering department and our traffic operations center, obviously capital improvements are very important to the quality of life in our community. But we're going to be coming to the next work session to talk about traffic and the level of delays that are occurring at some of our intersections that are adjacent to the I-65 corridor, and hopefully seeking advice from you. And that all translates into the technology and planning we do to help manage the growth in the city. Thank you for giving me a few minutes, and I'll turn it over to Tom and Alex, and then to our planning and engineering department.
Good afternoon. I'm Tom Marsh, the Director of the Building and Neighborhood Services Department. First, I'd like to introduce a couple of folks I have with me. I have Alex Brown is our Assistant Director for Development Services. Unfortunately, our Assistant Director for Building Services, Rodney Prince, couldn't be here with us today. And also have Ms. Kathleen Sauceda, who is our Housing Development Coordinator, as you know, heavily involved in the Community Development Block Grant part of this discussion. Certainly for the two of you, you know what the Building and Neighborhood Services Department is about. We support safety, health, and quality of life for residents, businesses, and visitors through enforcement of adopted codes. The department is organized into two broad clusters: development services, which Alex oversees, and building services. That was a reorganization that we executed in 2019, about this time in 2019. As the department grew and the work that we did expanded, we recognized that need for kind of broader coverage, and that's been working pretty well for the last few years. First thing I want to touch on is some of our accomplishments in the past year. It was a year of transition for the Building and Neighborhood Services Department. We successfully hired and onboarded 8 new employees. That's almost 25% of our department that turned over in 1 year through various causes, some retirements and other transitions that created some openings, and we successfully got through that, and it's been a pretty good year for us. Our BNS staff achieved 38 new International Code Council certifications. Those new certifications included several employees who went beyond the minimum required for their positions. And part of that obviously is associated with having so many new personnel. They had to get the basic requirements for their positions, but several went above and beyond. And as foreshadowing, we appreciate that. That's made possible through the resources that you make available to us for training and professional development and so on. We also issued 5,806 permits with a total construction valuation of $874 million for calendar year 2022. As you all know, that kind of represents the amount of investment that the private sector is making in our community. And the last accomplishment to touch on from our building inspection group, there's 10 individuals in that group, and they averaged 395 inspections per week for a total of over 20,000 inspections for the year. And on a given week, there's 10 folks in that group, but on any given week, as you can imagine, a few people out here and there. So it wasn't always 10 people out to get that work done in a week. Already alluded to this with the two groups, and I won't touch on the organization for very long. We have no changes requested in our organization. Like I said, we executed the transition a couple of years ago to create the two broad sections with the two assistant directors, and we will continue with that structure going forward. With that, we'll get into a couple of the base budget discussions, and Alex has done a lot of work in putting our budget together for the last few years, so I'll turn it over to him to walk you through that.
Good afternoon. Thank you for your time today. I'm going to go over. Okay, sorry. Good afternoon. Thank you for your time. I'm going to go over a few slides dealing with our budget request for this year. Our personnel budget request totals just over $3.74 million. What that consists of is 37 funded positions. We currently have 3 vacant positions, 2 plans examiner positions, and 1 building inspector positions. We plan to fill those in fiscal year 24. This also increased a little bit based on assumed retirement benefit cost and medical premium cost. So it's pretty basic on the personnel side. As Tom mentioned, there's really no organization changes. We're just going to fill these vacant positions and continue on. Operations budget request is just over $375,000. It focuses on 3 primary areas, mainly training. We moved around some funds and some budget line items to provide for more internal and external training, to provide opportunities for our skilled technical staff to continue to get certifications, to continue to work on their continued education, to provide levels of service commitments that we provide. So the other costs associated with property and liability cost increases and e-commerce fees, which are going up. Some of those fees will be offset by our technology fee collections, $10 per permit. So those fees will be offset a little bit. As Vernon mentioned, we have 1 program enhancement request for BNS this year. It deals with the consultant services request to evaluate and survey our development community based on our city's development services processes and service delivery. That totals $50,000. To summarize, Building and Neighborhood Services, in general, the city's development remains strong. We have multiple large-scale developments, many smaller-scale projects. This budget request will allow our staff to continue to focus on technological innovation, to improve staff efficiency and the applicant experience overall. It also will allow our highly skilled and technical employees to continue to train, gain certifications, and focus on professional development. Thank you.
Alex or Tom, either one, would there's the survey, will it be anonymous?
We have not, that is our goal for sure. We've just started discussions about how we will conduct this.
Okay.
And whether it's anonymous or confidential, we certainly want our customers to feel comfortable to share with us whatever's on their minds. So, with that, we'll pause with BNS and I'll transition to the community development block grant part real quickly if,
All right.
so. Kathleen's going to stay to the side. As you know,
She's
our-
ready
yeah.
to spring into action if she needs to.
She's ready. She's ready if needed. As you know, the community development block grant portion of the budget is essentially a pass-through. The city of Franklin is an entitlement community with the Department of Housing and Urban Development. We have been an entitlement community since 2007. We have an annual grant from HUD that we're allocated, and we just work to pass those funds through to eligible activities with our not-for-profit partners in the community. Since 2007, the city has received approximately $2.6 million over all those years. For the last few years and for fiscal year '24, the city anticipates being allocated approximately $375,000 in CDBG funds again. And this slide shows you the fiscal year '23 and fiscal year '24. What we ended up with for '23 was $370,744. And so we usually don't find out that allocation until actually June or July. So that's why it's always an estimate when we get to you for our budget presentation. Our allocations to our not-for-profit partners remain the same. Community-based development organization, public facilities, and repair and rehabilitation. We don't have anything programmed specifically for land acquisition this year, but through the community-based development organizations, if one of our not-for-profit partners, that is strictly for building affordable housing. So part of the cost for construction obviously would be land acquisition. So if one of the partners has land acquisition as part of building a new house, they could be reimbursed for that also. And then the larger category, as you see, is the public facilities. Everyone may recall for the last couple of years, we've anticipated some larger projects coming from some of our partners, and the public facilities, they can use that for obviously reimbursement for infrastructure work associated with those projects. And so we still look forward to this next year or the year after having some of those larger projects with significant infrastructure construction, that those funds can be used to reimburse that work. In addition to our regular CDBG funds, as you know, over the last couple of years, we also had the Community Development Block Grant Coronavirus Award, and we have successfully spent down, I do need to turn to Kathleen.
It's down to under $200,000.
Yeah.
We had over 700.
Okay, so overall, we were allocated over $700,000 for specifically CDBG coronavirus, and we're now down to under $200,000 left in that program. And as you recall, we've partnered with about 13 agencies for different programs and projects related to respond to or recover from the coronavirus. And with that, we are done with BNS and CDBG unless you have any questions for us.
Gentlemen, ladies, thank you. Good afternoon, ladies.
Hi, good afternoon. I am Emily Wright, Director of the Planning and Sustainability Department, as you know, and I have with me Amanda Rose, our Preservation Planner. She's going to join me to talk about one of the program enhancement requests. So I'll jump right in. The purpose of the Planning and Sustainability Department, as you know, is to protect and enhance the built and natural environment by providing comprehensive vision for future growth, protection of historic and natural resources, and excellent planning services for businesses and residents of Franklin. And we do this by working with the Planning Commission and the Board of Mayor and Aldermen to identify long-range planning initiatives. We process and review annexation requests and current development applications to continue quality growth. And then we provide assistance to a number of commissions, including the Historic Zoning Commission, the Civil War Historical Commission, the Board of Zoning Appeals, and the Sustainability Commission. This is our current organization chart. We don't have any changes proposed to it this year. We do have an intern position that's been unfunded for several years and continues to be unfunded in fiscal year '24.
So there's not much change to fill in that one, is it?
Not much change, no. In terms of our accomplishments, I'm not going to read through all these, but these are 8 projects that we completed this year in our long-range and historic preservation planning areas. You can read through those at your own convenience, but we did accomplish quite a few tasks this year. We also created and presented 3 land use scenarios to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen and Planning Commission for the Goose Creek Coordinated Study that followed public outreach meetings and technical analysis and studies. We'll have some more information coming regarding that study over the next few months and hope to wrap that up by the end of this fiscal year and incorporate any changes into the comprehensive Envision Franklin update. We implemented Civic Clerk agenda software for our Board of Zoning Appeals, Historic Zoning Commission, and its Design Review Committee. And we assigned electronic devices to both of those groups and the members of those groups to reduce paper waste and increase functionality at meetings. Then lastly, I've listed our development review accomplishments. I won't run through all the numbers, but you can see we had quite a large amount of plan review this year, not only in our current planning division, but also with BZA and historic zoning applications for certificates of appropriateness as well. In terms of the base budget, and for personnel, there's a slight minimal decrease due to benefit elections, but we're currently fully staffed for the first time in many years, so very excited about that. So that decrease is just very minimal. In terms of operations, we have a slight decrease in our due to some consultant services. We expect to complete the Goose Creek study before the end of fiscal year '23, but we do have rollover of funds for the comprehensive update to Envision Franklin in the amount of $95,000 rolling over into fiscal year '24. For our timeline on that, we are doing the majority of our kind of existing conditions, info gathering, public outreach through April of this year. And then we'll go into an evaluation stage where we really take all that information we got and start delving into the design concepts and other parts of the plan and really studying what changes need to be made and how we best think we can make those changes in light of the feedback that we heard throughout that first phase of the process. Then that'll take us until about August, we anticipate. And then we start producing some revisions to the plan and bringing those to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen and Planning Commission at joint work sessions to really run some things by you, continue to evaluate and make changes until the fall. And then we would go into an action stage where we'd really be presenting a final draft. First an initial draft, gaining feedback and having a community meeting regarding that draft, and then moving into the formal approval process with a final draft. And we're really aiming to take this to Planning Commission in January of 2024. That is very ambitious, but we would like to at least aim for the first quarter of 2024. So that's a timeline update for you there. In addition, on operations, though, we do have some standard equipment replacement for employees and commissioners, our planning commissioner tablets, as well as we have transcription services for minutes for various boards and commissions that go under our base budget, and we'll continue to emphasize professional education for our planners. So on that note, we have two program enhancement requests. Our first program enhancement request is in the amount of $35,000 for a departmental review team continuing education opportunity. We originally had budgeted some travel funds for our departmental review team in fiscal year 2020. We did not end up taking the trip. It was planned for the spring of 2020. And so we actually have a credit still currently for the flights that had already been purchased. And we were able to get our money back in terms of a voucher. So that's incorporated into this cost. But we are still looking currently at taking this trip to the Austin, Texas area, Georgetown, Texas, and San Marcos, Texas, where we think there's some really good educational opportunities to learn from other cities on various issues that we face. This amount would cover air travel, ground transportation, meals and lodging. The trip would be for about 20 to 25 participants, depending on if we were able to go to this location or had to adjust based on the funding. But some of the goals are really to see how other cities tackle a variety of issues that we see day in and day out, ranging from stormwater management, infill and growth pressures, changing transportation trends, aging infrastructure, and quality design standards, just to name a few of the things that we really focus on here. So we'd really like to gain some insight on how other places tackle that so we can be creative and flexible in how we address the changing trends as we continue to grow and evolve as a city. So that's the first program enhancement request. Does anybody have any questions on that one?
Let me just, has there been any contact with those, you named three cities. I remember Austin, I don't remember the other. San Marcos.
Yes.
Yeah, well, that's 2 out of 3 is not bad.
Yeah, that's good.
So is there any contact?
We actually had the full trip planned back in 2020, and we have an itinerary and everything worked up, and we have continued to keep in touch specifically with San Marcos throughout this time, because we had hoped that we would be able to bring this back before you when we felt like it was achievable to travel again. This is really the first opportunity. I think our full DRT is really ready and able to go on a trip like this again.
So you really didn't get the money, but you just got a IOU,
Yep.
okay?
So I'll move on to our next program enhancement request, and I'll let Amanda discuss this.
Hi, I am Amanda Rose, the Preservation Planner, and I'm the direct liaison to the Historic Setting Commission, its Design Review Committee, and the Civil War Historical Commission. The Civil War Historical Commission has 3 subcommittees, one of which is working on the project I'm presenting to you today. It is the U.S. Line Marker Project. The intent of the proposal is to demarcate on the urban landscape the locations where the federal trench line was located during the Battle of Franklin. This information has been provided by using historical mapping overlaid with modern mapping to determine those locations. It crosses roughly a section just over a mile in length between the north part of the Harpeth River at the bend that's sort of close to the Bicentennial Park, and then moves south in a C shape down to Lewisburg Avenue at that location of the river. The point in marking these locations is to provide just a visual cue to our public and our tourists of where the Battle of Franklin took place. The reason that the trench line is so important is because that is the location where the clash took place. The U.S. troops were located there. It's interesting, there was an intent to leave Franklin, but the bridges at the north part of the Harpeth River were not accessible. And so the engineers were working to build more bridges, and so they built the entrenchment during that time to be safe, and then Hood attacked. So that's been marked archaeologically at Columbia Avenue, which we do have some location indicated on the ground to show where that is. And that would be the first place we'd like to start. In all, there are 19 markers over about 10 roadways, one on each side of the roadway. There is a unique location at Natchez Street and West Polk Street where there's an offset intersection, which would be 3 markers. The initial 2 are proposed to be at Columbia Avenue at the Carter Hill Battlefield Park, which would be a great location to start showcasing that, to show our public, the affected property owners, as you're aware that this location goes through many roadways, including some residential areas. We're excited to show that to them, and we will be presenting at the work session on the 28th of this month to talk about those first 2 markers. But in preparation for that, we have went ahead and requested funds to pursue this project over the next 2 fiscal years, the total being shown on the screen. That would include the markers themselves, the installation and shipping of those markers, the surveying necessary to put those markers in locations that are safe within, whether it's the local right-of-way or the state right-of-way, or acquiring easements from affected property owners in order to do so as well. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
You may have already answered. Do you expect all of those to be visible from a road?
Yes, that it really is the intent of the project.
Because you can see the trench work off of 96
Yes.
heading, I guess it's east or whatever it is. And when that marker is there now, there is a marker there. I don't know whether that's what it says or not. I guess that's an indication I haven't slow enough to read it, but yeah.
But we're hopeful that these markers will really show the breadth of the battle. A lot of people think Carter House, but that was really the epicenter of the action, but it was much longer. And it's going to really show how our landscape was affected and how changes have occurred over time, but it's all affected how we live today. Thank you.
Any questions?
I do have a question. I appreciate it. And it's not for Amanda, but it's actually for Emily. You mentioned in your report the number of, you had 40 variances that were requested. You had 4 appeals, but you didn't include Envision Franklin Amendment requests. And the reason I'm kind of asking it the way I do is to kind of gauge really how our process is and what the quality of our regs and documents are. So.
That's because I didn't include that number because we did not have any Envision Franklin Amendment requests in 2022.
Wow.
So, yeah, we
Did you
actually
discourage
have
them, or
really
did they-
slowed down a number of Envision Franklin Amendment requests. I think, there was a trend early on as Envision Franklin Amendment requests came in, that there wasn't really a significant change from the time that the document had been adopted to warrant some of the requests. And several requests were denied initially. I don't know if that had an impact on the number of requests we saw coming in. But we know that things have changed since it was adopted, and that's why we're really hoping to cover a large amount of breadth with our comprehensive update. Any more questions?
I think that's a reflection of the board too, that the board kind of developed an attitude, don't bring me those modifications anymore, or those amendments.
Well, it continues to be a busy and exciting time for us. We continue to focus on managed growth, historic preservation and sustainability, housing choices and quality of place, regional transportation and mobility, and a long-term and vibrant economy. Our main priorities for fiscal year '24 include the Williamson County Growth Plan update and getting that taken care of and hopefully adopted, as well as completing the comprehensive update to Envision Franklin. We're excited to welcome and mentor a number of new team members, and we continue to provide a high level of planning services for development activity and long-term planning needs. So thank you for listening to us today, and I'll turn it over to engineering.
Let me ask one more question if I could, Mr. Chairman. This one's to Amanda. I remember some time ago, we looked at the monuments that you're going to put at the battlefield line. Did we approve those? Is that
So-
an approved?
We have worked intermittently on the project. There have been some reasons that we've had to slow down the project over time, but ultimately, this has been before the board's attention before, but there hasn't been any monetary request until now.
But the monument's been designed.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. We've made some tweaks. It's 5 feet tall now, limestone, so it does feel like something that I believe the community can be proud of.
Do they all say the same thing?
Yes, so it's four-sided, and we can put that
Yeah.
image back up if that helps.
Okay.
This rendering was actually done by Representative Sam Woodson at the time that he was on the Civil War Historical Commission. Since that time, we've polished this a little bit. The base is about 6.5 feet tall, or 6.5 feet tall, with the overall height of it being 5 feet. It will say U.S. Army line down two sides, one on the opposite sides of each other, and then on those two opposing sides, it'll have a cannon silhouette within the base. It is the hope of the commission to move forward with some educational programming for these two, to provide some information. Once people see these, ask what they are. We can provide some information through digital and paper means to supplement knowledge of the Battle of Franklin.
I'm going to digress just a little bit. I have mentioned realigning the road, and I can't think of the street up here on Columbia Avenue where you go into the library, that comes out and the other one comes out. Is that in the realm of any committee or anything, anybody coming before you to look at that? You understand what I'm saying? You've got a traffic signal you got two traffic signals within 10 yards of one another.
It's probably more of an engineering question. But it's property we don't own. I mean, you'd have to get into that property that there's those two office buildings that are
That's right,
back to back there. You need to look at that.
yes.
Well, actually, I would have realigned the other
Yeah.
one where in
Oh.
the battlefield itself to
Yeah.
come down
Okay.
to hit the signal that's in those, that goes
I see what
into
you
the
mean, yeah.
library.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
So, yeah, well, it's just a thought. I
I
asked
don't
that.
know if that's in any long-term
You're talking
plans
about
to
Barnhill
realign.
Drive?
It's,
That's on Pinewood Road.
it's not in any long-term plans that we have, but from a traffic engineering standpoint, it'd be great. We just would have to work through that with Parks and the historic folks to
Okay.
make sure it makes sense. But it's definitely on the radar and has been talked about in the past.
Because that, in all honesty, shouldn't say a terrible intersection, but you have a tremendous delay there because you've got one light and
Yeah, it's
and
strange.
the other one. And I don't think anybody ever northbound would turn right when they've got to go 10 yards to get to the next road to turn right. So they usually sit there, then you watch them and they'll turn right. But I guess you could go through the intersection as long as nobody was coming, just as if it was a parallel intersection there. So anyway, all right, that answers my question on that. That just would remind me when you said something about all the monuments and the lines and where we are. I dare say a whole lot of people in Franklin don't realize that there was that battle line from the Harpeth around to the other.
And that's what we're hoping to enlighten our community with these markers.
Would there be any way to walk from one end to the other?
I believe there's a way to do that. It's not a firm path, but you could definitely walk those streets and get from one to the
Because
other.
there probably would be a good deal of interest in that.
Absolutely, and that can be part of our educational component is to develop a path or a walkway recommendation for that. I'd probably work with Paul's team to make sure I get people walking in a safe direction.
And you know, we've talked about trying to extend the sidewalk on Lewisburg just so that people would be able to walk.
Absolutely. I've been working very closely with Mr. Holzen on this, and I can't thank him enough for his help as we've worked through this proposal to get it to you. So we do know that would be something we'd want to consider phasing in with that sidewalk improvement, assuming that comes soon.
Ladies, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. So Paul, are you next?
I'm next.
All right.
With me is Robin Freeman. She's our engineering associate. She does our budget for us, and this is her first year putting it together, and she's done a great job, and we're proud to present it to y'all. So the engineering department is mainly 4 divisions. We have a development services division that really focuses on private infrastructure, a capital projects division, a traffic operations, and a stormwater division. As I said, development services that works a lot with planning, new development, in the private investment in the community. Our capital projects teams works on the funded projects that you all fund to help deliver those. In our traffic operations center, they handle the traffic signal timing all around the city. There's 5 major corridors, and they are always getting complaints, getting recommendations, evaluating that, trying to improve traffic flow throughout the city. And then we have a stormwater division that really help us implement our MS4 permit that is issued by the state of Tennessee. This is just our organization chart that just shows those different divisions. And there's no change this year in what we're asking for as it relates to personnel. So in engineering, the base budget is generally the same. It's a decrease that's mainly just due to equipment replacements, and that's pretty much the trend through this budget is the computer replacements just fluctuate year to year, and some years more than others. Traffic operations, again, it's all around equipment and computers replacements and some traffic controller replacement. There's also a slight decrease in the capital funding because we were slowly getting some of those projects done with the adaptive signal project getting completed, and we're working on new grants to help fix our infrastructure as we move forward. Stormwater, as it relates to operations, again, it's a slight decrease. Again, it's all geared around computer replacements, and all the capital investment projects that we've had in stormwater has since been moved now to the prioritization process that the board goes through.
In other words, there are not any.
There is none, correct. As far as program enhancements, the only ones that we're asking for is within the Traffic Operations Center. We recently applied for a grant to signalize South Margin, Lewisburg, and Fifth Avenue. It's one of our highest crash rate intersections that we have. We have some preliminary plans, high-level plans worked up as to what we would do there, but ultimately we would need to move forward with the design and go through public involvement meetings with the community and implement that. It would probably take a few years, obviously, to go through that, but we recently applied for a grant with TDOT. Our contribution would be $250,000 for that intersection. And then the other improvement we're asking for is looking to do a span wire type signal at Donaldson Creek and Lewisburg. It's another intersection that's been warranted. That's mainly warranted off of volume, not necessarily crash and accident history, but given the warrant on volume, we would like to proceed with trying to get the design done and moving into construction for that project. Given the fact that we know Lewisburg will one day be widened, we would propose to do a span wire system that can either be shifted in the future, or we just could flat out replace if and when funding is ever allocated to widen Lewisburg Pike.
So that's coming out of Sullivan Farms to Lewisburg.
Correct. And with that said, our budget is fairly similar to last year, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Any questions? Thank you. I would say, Paul, that both of those are super needed,
Yes. I would agree.
super needed.
Among other things.
Eric or Christine, anyone next?
I think we've covered them all. I think you are
I
set.
don't see anybody jumping up.
Yeah. Anybody have anything else to add? No, I think you've heard from everybody.
All
From
right.
the Development Services team.
Then can we vote on, can we vote on that?
I think you just
adjourning?
end your meeting.
All right.
Since you don't have a quorum, I think you just
Me-
declare the
meeting is
meeting
ended.
closed.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. Have a good
Thank
rest
you.
of the day.